Hello everyone, my name is Paul, and I don't make videos very often, but I decided to make one because I'm really excited because I'm a big Ace Combat fan, and I just thought that I would share some of my insights about the trailer. Sure that no one will really watch this, but whatever, I'm just kind of making this out of my own excitement. So here we go. This is the new Ace Combat 7 trailer. It's been like almost a year since the first trailer for this game was released, so we were all kind of worried that maybe the game had been stopped in terms of its development because it had been so long and we hadn't really heard anything, but now it looks like we have got another trailer. It contains a lot more information than the first one, and it actually looks like they've developed a significant amount of the game, so I'm sure that we will be seeing it soon, within the next year at least. I don't know. Hopefully sometime within 2017. Probably not this year, though, at this point, considering it's December. But here we go. We're going to go ahead and just look through the trailer here. I've noticed quite a few things that can tell us some information about the game when we get started. So first of all, we get this aircraft landing at the beginning. This is an Erusian aircraft. And basically, I think it's identified later as an Su-30SM, technically speaking. Now, this guy, so I'm assuming this is the guy who came out of the fighter that we see in the very opening shot of this trailer. We see he's wearing like a very sort of ultra-modern / futuristic flight suit, and he appears to be wounded. Maybe this was from combat, or maybe he was a test pilot on some sort of experimental aircraft or experimental weapon, and he's clearly injured, so he's getting some medical attention here. We can tell he's an Erusian pilot by, if I skip back here, we can see the patch on his shoulder off to the far right side of the screen, and that is an Erusian patch, so we know that's where he's from. And so if we keep going here, now this is an interesting question, or I should say this raises an interesting question, this next shot. So we see that there are 3 pilots, and they're being led away in some sort of detention facility by these soldiers here. Now, it's actually really hard to tell what the situation is. I'm pretty sure that this woman, at least, is an Ocean Air Force pilot, because we see her later in the trailer next to an Ocean Air Force plane, and she seems to be inspecting it or, preparing it. So I don't know if this is an Erusian prisoner of war camp and that they've been captured and she's being held here, or if she was involved in some sort of maybe suspected of treachery or something, as Ace Combat is kind of known for playing that card every once in a while. And this is actually an Ocean prisoner of war camp, and they're just holding her here for a while, or if there's something else going on that we don't even know. So, Ace Combat is known for having kind of wild and convoluted stories sometimes, but are quite enjoyable. So we'll keep going here. We get some shots of her in prison later as well. So we see, this is where we get the first shot in this trailer anyway of the lighthouse, is what it's referred to in the first trailer. This is some sort of space elevator that appears to be built in Erusia. I'm not sure if any more information has been released about that or not, but we see from the cockpit of an F-18 here, and it's way out in the distance, just like a thin line against the sky, essentially. I will explain why I think the space elevator has been built in Erusia when we get to a shot that I think better gives that away. So, okay, here we go. Here's the shot. I'm pretty sure this is Farbanti. So, if anybody remembers from Ace Combat 4, the city of Farbanti is the capital of Erusia. I think this pretty similarly meets the bill of Farbanti. It's been a while since I've played Ace Combat 4, not going to lie, but I remember we had those hills off to the side there. If you can see kind of past the buildings, you just get kind of these hilly country. Also, we see some different canals and things going through the city, or different waterways and bridges and stuff, and I remember that distinctly from Ace Combat 4. And also, if we look out into the distant edge of the city, we see that there's part of the city that's actually like out in the water a little bit, that's kind of on its own little island, not connected to the rest of the mainland of the city, and that is also a thing that we know about Farbanti, is that there is a segment of the city that's out in the water. It was actually flooded, so I don't know if maybe it's still flooded or if it's been rebuilt to kind of just be built up a little to not be some flooded city that's out into the ocean a little bit, that it's actually a functional part of the city again now. Of course, I could be wrong. This could be a completely different city. It might even be in Osea, but I'm guessing it would probably be in Farbanti. I'm not sure, though. Could always be wrong, and you can see, of course, there's the lighthouse in the distance there. We'll keep going forward here. We have a fighter pilot. This looks like it might be that same guy that we saw at the beginning who was injured. His flight suit, again, kind of meets the characteristics of that sort of ultra-modern look, and his face looks very similar from what we do see of it, so I'm pretty sure this is the same gentleman. This is interesting. Okay, this is obviously not a pilot, so this is like some sort of device that is sitting in the seat of this fighter. I don't know if this is some sort of robotic device that it can essentially can make a normal manned aircraft into like an unmanned vehicle. That's my most likely explanation for what this is. It seems a little silly, but it's possible, I guess, if you were going to adapt a aircraft to a drone. I feel like there'd be better ways of doing it, but it looks cool, and it's kind of an interesting take on the whole thing here. So I'm guessing this is some sort of remotely controlled device or completely autonomous device that can fly a fighter jet. So if we keep skipping forward here, we see again, looks like an Erusian Su-30SM is what, again, this is referred to later in the trailer as. And we have the same pilot again with his advanced flight suit on. He's got this cool heads-up display. We have some nice thrust vectoring engines. And there we have a great shot of the fighter. Got all sorts of missiles on it. We see this airfield at multiple times throughout this trailer, so we'll get into that further later, but it appears to be some sort of strip in the desert. It does not appear to be like a paved airfield, so that's kind of cool. We haven't seen that in any recent Ace Combat games, at least. I don't know if they were in any of the very old ones. I didn't play Ace Combat 3 or 2 or any of those. I just played 4, 5, 6, Assault Horizon, and 0. We have these guys talking in this sort of rundown area here. Again, we can't really tell if these guys are Erusians or Oseans. This is an Osean F-15. It's being pursued by an Erusian fighter we see later, and this is probably an Osean F-22. Okay, we keep going here. Yep, again, we have the, if we skip back, we have, looks like we're looking through the tail of this F-15, looking at this Erusian fighter. And again, it's an Su-30SM. Alright, so here we have an F-22. Now this starts an interesting recurring theme that we see multiple times throughout the trailer. So it appears that this aircraft is an Osean aircraft, and it has these 3 markings on the tail. Now I'm not entirely sure what these mean, but it is possible that this is the player's aircraft. Because every aircraft that we see with these 3 markings on it is numbered 15, which we know from previous experience that Ace Combat games typically have the player's aircraft, regardless of what aircraft you're flying, all have the same serial number, which is a little interesting, but that could be what this is that this is a player's aircraft. It could also mark something else. It could be a breakaway faction from Osea or something. I'm not sure, but my most likely explanation is that this is the player's aircraft. So we'll keep going here. We have a nice look at some in-game footage by the looks of things. We see we've got our heads-up display. We have a really nicely modeled cockpit. Everything looks fantastic. We see some allied aircraft down in the lower right corner. A few things that we can learn about this. Again, we see Su-30SM, so that's how we're getting what the identification of that particular aircraft is. We see that in this mission there is a timer counting down as opposed to counting up. That's not telling us a whole lot, but apparently this is some sort of timed mission. We see that this is apparently worth 200 points to shoot down this plane, so I don't know. That's about all we can tell. We can tell that we have infinite gun ammo, so this is hopefully being played on one of the lower difficulties. Hopefully you don't have infinite gun ammunition on all the difficulties, because I personally like playing on some of the harder difficulties where they limit you a bit more in terms of your munitions. We see we have 48 missiles remaining. We have 4 AAMs, or not, sorry, 4 AMs. We have a weapon called 4 AM, and we have 28 of those remaining. And we see FLR. I'm hoping this is for flare. I hope that there are flares in this game that you can drop those to try and help defeat oncoming missiles, but there's no confirmation of that. I just hope it's for flare. So that's kind of what we can infer from this. We're back to this guy from earlier. He was the guy in the rundown area. We have an F-18 going through an explosion, as it does, you know, casually. Keep going here. we have an F-15, and again, this appears to be the player's aircraft because it's got those 3 stripes on the left vertical stabilizer, and it's marked number 15, and it's an Ocean aircraft. I assume the player will be Ocean for this game and not Erusian. And it seems to be firing some sort of burst laser weapon system, where it's firing these little bursts of laser projectiles. Projectiles isn't really the correct word, but some sort of energy weapon that it's firing as a gun type thing from these pods underneath of its wings. And again, this kind of plays into the theme that this is sort of a near future game, and so we've kind of had these traditional combat aircraft being adapted for these with these advanced weapons. Of course, Ace Combat has always kind of stretched the boundaries of what exactly is possible with aircraft, from things like the Arcbird and various laser-equipped things to completely fictional aircraft that make their appearance in some of the games. But we see that, yeah, these light beams do seem to be coming from these pods. So I'm guessing that is a special weapon. So we see just an F-18 cockpit killing something. We see some really nice moisture effects on the cockpit of this fighter here. It appears to be an F-18. Okay, this is referred to in the trailer as the Arsenal Bird. And it carries a crap load of unmanned aerial vehicles. As you can see that it's dropping. Presumably that's going to be really hard to deal with. There's a whole swarm of unmanned aerial vehicles that you'll have to shoot down, or at least avoid getting shot down by. And then also you've got this giant aircraft itself will probably have some sort of weapon system on it, and also hits. I really like the design of this vehicle. I think it looks great. I like these little drones. Their little flipping maneuver thing to open their wings feels a bit unnecessary, but whatever, it's Ace Combat. You gotta have these cool little things, I guess. But yeah, I really like the design of this vehicle. It really feels massive to me, and it just kind of feels properly proportioned. It's got these nice giant propeller blades. I really like it. I like it better in terms of design than most of the other previous giant aircraft that we've had in the Ace Combat franchise. Okay, here we have an F-18 Super Hornet, and it's flying up to, it's flying almost directly up, and this is, we see below it the base of the Lighthouse space elevator. We see that it's really big. We get a big scale for a good scale for how big this thing is. We see there's some sort of highway built over the water that presumably goes back to the mainland. It's not too far off of the mainland, as we saw on that shot of that city, and we saw the lighthouse sticking up in the distance. Again, I think it's Farbanti, but who knows. And we see some big, huge container ships that are docking or are docked with the little harbor facilities around the base of the lighthouse. So really cool, really big structure. I'm sure it'll feel massive in the game. It's a neat thing to have. Oh, one more thing. So this fighter, this is an Ocean F-18. This squadron patch appears to be the same as the one on the player's aircraft. I'm not sure about that, again, because that squadron patch is covered up by the player's weird triple dash thing, but it looks similar in color anyway. It's kind of hard to tell because we have so much motion blur in this image, but we can tell this is an Ocean aircraft. We can see the Ocean flag also on the vertical stabilizer here. So yeah, we keep going. Watch that F-18 fly up into the distance. We can see it's armed with some sort of advanced weapon system down below. We see that in action a bit more later on in the trailer as well. Here we have, it looks like the Su-30 again. I'm not positive on that from the angle that we're seeing it, but it was shooting something down with its gun. This is the same city that has the space elevator off the coast of it. We can see that if we look off to the left in the very corner of the screen. It's very hard to make out. It's quite faint, but you can see the space elevator in the distance up in the upper left corner. Again, this might be Farbanti, it might not be. Keep going here. We get another great shot of the space elevator. I don't know if the F-18 will sort of be the title plane for Ace Combat 7 here. As you know, every Ace Combat game sort of has a main aircraft that features prominently in it. The F-18 might be the aircraft that does that in this particular installation of the franchise. We see quite a bit of the F-18, and we've already had the F-22 in Ace Combat 4. and the F-15 in Ace Combat 0, so it would be nice to see the F-18 and be a new aircraft that hasn't really featured prominently yet in any of the Ace Combat games, and it is a very cool aircraft, so it'll be cool to see if that is our title aircraft. And we have the F-18 again. This is that previously mentioned sort of unpaved strip, or it's a strip out in the desert, kind of like a salt flat thing. This appears to be an F-104. This is a really cool aircraft. It's an older plane. They're pretty much all phased out of service now, but it is a cool aircraft, very high speed, and kind of overlooked part of history. I don't think it would be too weird for Ace Combat to have this plane in the game, considering that we know from Ace Combat 5 and Ace Combat 0 that Ace Combat really likes to pull planes in from eras that are a bit anachronistic, where you have the F-4 Phantom flying around in Ace Combat 5, which supposedly takes place in 2010, and so you have the F-4 Phantom flying around, and then you also got like F-22s and F-35s flying all over the place, and so you have these aircraft from really diverse eras that are all fighting together, even though the older ones should totally get smoked. It's just nice to have the variety, I guess. So that's cool to see the F-104 included in this game. I believe it has not been included in any previous Ace Combat games. So we keep going here. We see that this pilot does not have a lot of runway left when he takes off here. I would not attempt this takeoff in real life when I'm doing my performance calculations. But, this is a video game, so I guess whatever, do whatever you want. We have an F-22 here with a crap load of missiles on it. It's got these two little missile pods on the wings. Sort of neat, I guess. Spam a lot of missiles. I guess that could be useful for defeating that giant drone swarm we see dropping from the Arsenal bird. This appears to be the cockpit of the F-104 previously mentioned. Something to note, it looks like our instrument panel actually works, which is fantastic. We see our artificial horizon seems to be working. Our altimeter seems to be working. Everything looks like it's actually functioning as it should, from our wet compass and everything else. So that's pretty cool that we actually have working instrument panels in the aircraft in this game. We didn't have those in some of the older Ace Combats, so it's nice to see included in this one. If we keep going here, and we have an F-18, we have a Rafale now as well, so that's going to be in the game. That's not too surprising. We have an F-18 firing an some sort of electronic pulse weapon. Who knows if this is an electronic warfare device or if it's some sort of laser weapon. Pretty interesting. Again, we see some in-game footage, and we've got a the FLR shows up again, so I'm assuming again this is flares, but they're all used up because we see that it's indicating a 0 remaining. Here we have some drone fighters, I'm assuming, or UAV fighters, so they're pretty cool. They'll probably be very highly maneuverable, very hard to shoot down and hard to deal with. So then we have this lady in this jail cell. Looks like she's the same one from the beginning of the trailer. It's hard to tell if she is the same woman here, and if she's like thinking about her family or something, or if this is a completely different lady. As you can see, the hair looks a little different. Obviously it's different length, but different color as well, so it could be different. It's really hard for me to tell with the lighting in the cell and stuff like that. Obviously different lengths, but you can trim your hair. So this could be a different character, it could be the same character. Here's Stonehenge. Yeah, Stonehenge is apparently back, at least as a set piece. We don't know if this is operational. It looks like it's still totally destroyed from Ace Combat 4, but it might be that they're trying to bring it back online, or it might just be a cool set piece in one of the missions, and there could be something else going on in this area. Either way, it's pretty cool to see it back. We don't know anything about this character. She's just getting off of a Eurasian airplane. Apart from that, it's really hard to tell what her role is. Here we have that, it looks like the same woman who's in the prison cell, and she is walking up to what appears to be an Ocean F-15. So that's where I get my guess that she is an Ocean fighter pilot, but I could be wrong. So she's just inspecting that aircraft. We have a bunch of what appears to be an asteroid or meteor shower. We know that's kind of a theme in some of the Ace Combat games that happens. here's a squadron of aircraft. We have 3 F-15s, an F-18, and a Mirage. I don't know if this is trying to show off that maybe you can choose your allies' airplanes like you could in previous Ace Combat games, or what exactly this is trying to show. If it is, then it might be indicating that you have a squadron of 5 pilots in this game. I'm not sure if that's true or not, but again, might be what it's trying to indicate. And then here we have the last shot where we have an F-22, and we can barely make out on the F-22's vertical stabilizers. Let me try and scrub through here. We can make out the beginnings of those marks, those 3 dashes that seem to be indicating the player's aircraft. So there we go, that's Ace Combat 7. Looks like it's going to be a PS4 exclusive, which is a little unfortunate. I would have liked to see it on all the platforms, but that's fine, we can deal with it. So yeah, that's Ace Combat 7. I know this went a little long, but again, I'm not really expecting anyone to watch it. So, hope you guys enjoyed the video, if anyone who did by chance watch it, and thank you for listening to my weird ramblings, I guess. Alright, have a nice day.